What's up, Conroe? Welcome to a brand new edition of Nerd Thug Radio. Coming at you from 104.5, 106.1, the sister stations, and we're streaming worldwide at irlonestar.com. As always, you can check out the Facebook page, facebook.com/nerdthugradio, or just send us a message and say hi, and just tell us what you think. We're hanging out here on this Sporty Sport Thursday, and we're doing the Nerd Thug Sports thing. With me, as usual, little brother Nico via Anchor. How you doing?
Sports.
So you're doing sports. All right. We'll come back to you later. Yeah, man, it's been a week. We got Rockets coverage coming up to wrap up today's episode of Nerd Thug Sports. And yeah, I mean, it's just been a lot going on here. Which is nice. It's good to talk about.
Yeah. Last episode was just politics, and this one's now sports again.
Finally sports again. There's two things we really, really, really need to touch on this week. One is if you're a Houston Texans fan like me, it's a good story. It helps you out tremendously. And then if you're a Tom Brady fan, I also guess you love this story, I suppose. And then the other story that's worth talking about is in the NBA, and it is what's going on in Milwaukee. What's going on? What's happening in Milwaukee?
Milwaukee.
All right, so let's start here. Let's start with this. This is the big story here. For the NFL, the Jacksonville Jaguars all offseason had been looking for a trade partner for Leonard Fournette. They could not find one. Leonard Fournette is the guy from LSU who just ran all over people in college. I mean, there was just he was on the last good LSU team before Joe Burrows. And so Leonard Fournette was just trampling people like a galloping horse. Like, this guy just ran like a madman. And his first year in Jacksonville, he was awesome. He delivered, I think, around 1,300 yards rushing, great numbers, very impressive, and was like the guy. That offseason, I think they were a little unhappy with his attendance for their offseason programs.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, he started off the year with a hamstring injury, and they mismanaged it. They kept trying to play him too soon. So every other week, he would come in and play, and he would get like 5 or 6 carries and then have to come out because the injury would get aggravated. And instead of just giving him the time to sit down and play it out, to sit down and heal it up, they just kept trying to put him out there, and it never worked. It didn't work at all. This was weird, though, because this was their offense. Their philosophy is great defense, solid running. The problem is when Leonard Fournette's not in the game, the running isn't good enough. Mm-hmm. So they really felt like they needed to get him out there, but
he wasn't there.
He wasn't healthy. But they kept doing it, and that was the thing that was really. I mean, the long and short of it, it's a mistake. It's an absolute mistake. And they just kept making it over and over and over again. And
it's like a lot of people don't understand. Like, once your player gets injured, it's like they're not themselves. They're not going to be 100%. You can't have them out there like that.
Yeah, you can't send them out there hurt. There's some guys, like offensive linemen, probably play hurt most of the year. And I get it. You can't do that with running backs. Well, and especially not somebody like Leonard Fournette. The other thing is he came in a little bit heavier. And they sort of felt like he wasn't exactly the same shape he was the first year. And I'm not going to say out of shape, because I don't believe he was out of shape. They said he was overweight. I think he probably put on muscle to try and absorb the beating, because he knew that they were going to give him the ball another 120 times.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't matter, though, because first half of the season he barely played. And I had him on my fantasy team, and he was killing me, because every week it was the last minute decision: will he play, won't he play? And then the weeks he did play, it didn't matter. Finally, he sat down for like 3 weeks to heal, and then when he came back, he finished the year okay. But also in that time, they started to get mad at him. He missed a training session because of that, they suspended him or they gave him a punishment of some kind. And then because of the punishment, they then de-guaranteed his money on the last 2 years of his deal.
Ooh.
And that, to me, is the tipping point. When you go after a player's money, now the trust is broken. Like, player and franchise can now no longer communicate. And so, yeah, essentially, from there, it was all like last year was a mess. He was running okay, but they just weren't happy with him. Enter into the offseason, they want to dump him for whatever reason. And I don't necessarily agree with it at all.
How dare you get hurt and then not be 100% and then continue to not be 100% because we keep playing you?
Well, listen, franchises aren't going to sit around and say that they screwed up. So if there's ever a problem,
I know that.
They're going to blame the player.
I know that. It's just funny how little it makes sense when you step back from it.
Oh, yeah. When you say it out loud, it doesn't. The team almost always sounds stupid when you say it out loud. Almost always. But in these instances, it's not like they're ever going to turn around and go, "Do you think we're overplaying this?" No, they're not going to do that.
Absolutely not.
And so, yeah, sure enough, they couldn't find a single trade partner, allegedly. And so they have now waived Leonard Fournette, making him a free agent.
Good for him.
It's too late in the offseason to get like a huge money deal. There's nobody right now who's going to turn around and give like $150 million contract to Leonard Fournette.
Yeah, that's probably not what he's expecting, honestly.
He probably needs to rehab his image a little bit. The rumor mill is that immediately he told his agent, "Hey, let's see if we can get Tampa Bay on the phone."
All right.
Which would give Tom Brady a top 5 running back in the league plus 2 top 15 receivers in the league. Like,
oh my God, Tools should have known.
Right. All of a sudden, Tom Brady's got people all around him who can really make plays with the ball, and suddenly the pressure's off. So we'll see what happens there. I kind of feel like that's where he winds up going, is Tampa Bay, which suddenly, here's the thing. I don't really 100% buy into the Tom Brady Tampa Bay setup. Jameis Winston threw downfield a ton. That's why he got hit so much. That's why there were so many interceptions. He threw downfield all the time.
He also had 50% accuracy at 100% blindness. So
true. That's a good point. Like, so much there. So much to unpack. But Tom Brady has one of the quickest releases in the NFL. He doesn't hold the ball long enough for plays to grow 30 yards downfield. He is going to hike it, look for his first option. The second he's got an open guy, he's going to throw the ball. Because Tom Brady doesn't take hits. That's how he makes it in the NFL.
That's how he's played for 9,000 years.
Correct. That's how you get to be 41, 40? What is it, 42? Whatever he is. That's how you get there in the NFL. By throwing the ball right away. So I don't really know that I buy the Mike Evans, Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski. They're just going to throw. But adding Leonard Fournette suddenly makes that a little bit more believable. Because if Leonard Fournette can run 20 times a game and get, 110 yards, 115 yards on carries, and then you start play action it, you start faking the run plays, you start making the defense freeze the linebackers, suddenly that buys you an extra second or two in the pocket, and now you can start throwing a little bit further down the field, and suddenly I start buying into the Mike Evans, Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady connection.
Mm-hmm.
I think a guy like Leonard Fournette validates Tom Brady's ability to hold the ball a little bit longer than he did in New England. New England never had a running game of any real consistency. They would finish a game with like 90 rushing yards, but it would be 5 different running backs doing it in weird combinations, and you never knew who was going to be your guy rushing in New England for any real time or yardage. One year they had a guy, I think his last name was Gray, completely undrafted, just signed off the street, and he played in like 5 games for like 600 yards, and then just went away. And so like they do this.
Shout out to that guy.
They just do this all the time. I'm exaggerating a little bit. I mean, I think he actually signed with the Patriots for a couple more years after that. But like, the reality was, no one ever heard of him, and then since then, it isn't like he's been repeat blowing it up. Like, it's not. It's just they're very inconsistent in their running game. They have like 5 running backs. One of them will get it done, or they'll give the ball to someone else. So and they just keep cycling until they find a guy. Mm-hmm. So he's just never had the ability to hold the ball that long. Now in Tampa Bay, Tom Brady might be able to do that if he's got Leonard Fournette. I mean, Leonard Fournette's a genuine threat to run upfield on every play. He breaks off long runs. And so there's just suddenly that offense looks a little more real to me.
And then suddenly we are somewhere where this is possible. We're entering a new era. Tom Brady not in the Patriots. Is he a good quarterback? We'll find out.
Well, and it's like, how crappy is it to judge it on a guy's like 42nd? You know what I'm saying? Like, at 42 years old, now we're going to decide if he's a good quarterback or not. Like, he obviously is good. 6 Super Bowls, 3 Super Bowl MVPs. Like, he obviously knows what he's doing. But
yeah, we're not saying he's bad. It's just that is he?
Oh, there are definitely people saying he's bad. And there was a chance for this year in Tampa to be a bit of a mess. But
if they can get Leonard.
Yeah, if Leonard Fournette winds up in Tampa Bay, I think that chance goes down significantly. I think that chance goes way down. The other guy out there that's just kind of – 2 other guys, 2 other weirdos. Antonio Brown. The NFL has decided he's going to be given an 8-game suspension if he's signed with the team. So
we're still talking about this how many years later?
Oh, well, this is now that he has a suspension and now teams know what they're getting. The idea is if you can sign him cheap, then week 9, a top 10 wide receiver joins your team in the middle of the season. That's kind of a big deal. And allegedly, Geno Smith and Russell Wilson down in Seattle are banging down the doors. They want Antonio Brown in the receiving corps. Now, Seattle's never known for having a great receiving corps. This would immediately make this probably the best receiving corps they have ever in Seattle, at least during the Russell Wilson era. And so that would be exciting for them for sure. Now, what would it take to make that work? Well, Antonio Brown would have to have his head screwed on straight, and I don't know if that's possible or not. So
you have to be a person for like. Right. Remember when he was in the Patriots for like a game?
1 game, had a touchdown, 5 catches, 80 yards of a touchdown, 1 game. Then they sent him home because he might have sent threatening messages to someone who might have been accusing him of rape. Maybe.
He really did throw that career so fast.
From Pittsburgh to nowhere, real quick. He had a bunch of money sitting there in Oakland.
Yeah, he went from the Raiders to Pittsburgh. Or was it Pittsburgh to Raiders to nowhere?
Yeah, had a bunch of money sitting there in Oakland and didn't even get it done. New England actually settled with him for cap space, so he got a little bit of money here recently. I believe I heard that. New England needed cap space, so they settled a bunch of open things. I think even including the Aaron Hernandez stuff, because they needed the cap space from the finality. Once everything's done, there's paper they can turn in and they get some money back kind of stuff.
What a weird system.
It just is. They needed the waiver turned in to get cap rebate on lost time sort of a thing. We couldn't spend the money 2 years ago because of that, so now we get a rebate back because now it turns out we didn't owe that money kind of a thing.
That's so dumb.
It's like if a lawyer does your taxes.
That's already a nightmare.
And Jadeveon Clowney, still a free agent.
Ugh.
According to people on TV, I'm just going to rip off and tell the story. Allegedly, he turned down $18 million from Cleveland very early on in the process because he thought he was worth 22, 23, somewhere in that range. And now he's getting offers in the 12 to 14 range, and the 18 is gone from the table.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is just the classic deal or no deal meme. Sometimes you don't know if you have the $1 million case, and sometimes you're just so stalwart that you have it that you turn down offers that clearly are good.
Well, and a lot of people are like, "Is this a bad agent deal? Is this like blah blah blah?" But apparently, just Jadeveon Clowney is Jadeveon Clowney. He just
He says 20, they go 12, and he's like, nope.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like negotiating with the Texas Hammer. When he shows up, he's like, "I want $1 million," and they're like, "Well, we'll give you 200,000." He's like, "I need $1 million," and you're like, "Well, no." That's it. That's the whole Jadeveon Clowney negotiating process, apparently. And the problem is, as prolific as a couple years have been, the other years have been so bad.
Yeah, and he's not the youngest guy. He has had a lot of injuries. He just hasn't completed a season for a while.
And last year he finished the season hurt, and also Seattle wasn't good, and he wasn't good.
Yeah, he had a great game. His first game there was amazing, and then everything after that wasn't great.
Yeah, you're right. I think he several I think a touchdown and a couple tackles for loss, like week 1 or week 2 with Seattle, and then
Yeah, and everyone was like, "Oh, we missed out on this guy," and then it was just all downhill from there.
right, and it wound up going nowhere, and that's kind of unfortunate for him. I think he finished the year with 6 sacks, but no one. I think all of Seattle finished with 20 or something like that. So the defensive line just sucked, and unfortunately he was a part of that unit. And if you're on a bad team, it reflects on you just as much as everyone else. So you can't leave a bad team and start demanding $20+ million.
Yeah, I'm clearly the only reason that team wasn't even worse. It's well, that
Right.
doesn't
I
really
was the
bode
reason
well.
it was as good as it was when it wasn't. That being said, we're going to jump out to a break. When we come back, we got more Nerd Thug Sports coming your way. The Adventure Begins Comics, Games, and More is open on 1488 at 525 Woodland Square Boulevard. With comics, games, and everything nerd related, The Adventure Begins is the one-stop nerd shop. On Saturdays, they alternate between having Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, and coming up, they also have cosplay crafting and trivia nights and BYOB nights. They're currently offering a 10% discount for limited time, which will be valid for as long as you grab your books every month. Hey, Conroe, this is Corey DLG of Nerd Thug Radio, hanging out here, just enjoying my quarantine time at home, and I hope everyone else is doing the same, social distancing and minding their manners and listening to the orders while we get all this health crisis straightened out and get this pandemic under control. I hope everyone's doing their part to flatten the curve, but doing their part also means supporting small businesses. Local businesses here in Conroe, restaurants, things of that nature that have been able to stay open, they require the support of their community. So takeouts is a good option to do. So reach out to those places, order some takeout food if you can afford it and if it's reasonable. I'm not asking anyone to risk their health, but the community has always relied on itself to support itself. And this is one of those times where, as Conroe, we can stand up together and take care of small businesses and entrepreneurs who've been taking care of us this whole time, helping Montgomery County grow into one of the fastest growing counties in all of America. Thank you very much, and stay safe, and stay tuned for more Nerd Thug Radio.
This is Rudy Tomjanovich, and welcome to Nerd Thug Radio.
Welcome back to Nerd Thug Sports, right here on 104.5, 106.1, the sister stations. And we're streaming worldwide at irlonestar.com. As always, you can check us out on facebook.com/Nerd Thug Sports. And, yeah, we're doing pretty good here this day on this Sporty Sport Thursday. How about you, little brother Nico? You doing okay?
I'm doing sports.
Doing sports. Listen, congratulations on doing sports, man. Proud of you.
Oh, yeah.
Proud
Happy
of you.
birthday, by the way.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. It is, in fact, my birthday.
Yep.
All lap dances and nude photos directed to my personal account.
Yeah. I mean, filled with angry college fans, but it's fine.
It's the one thing I don't miss at all. College football fans are the worst. I mean, there's just no getting around it.
Look, college sports are the worst. We can confirm this by legal evidence.
And their fans aren't much better. And I hate to say like a whole group of fans, but seriously, if you follow college sports, you are part of the problem.
Right. And now, like, we're not talking about people who are like, oh, I caught the college game on a Tuesday afternoon. We're talking, I donate to the program and I love this university with all of my heart.
Right.
I only paid $100,000 to it to get an education, which I did not use.
I guess I'll tell this. So, for me, the story, it became obvious how awful college sports can be. So, last year, for the whole year, I wrote for Sports Map Houston. And it was a fun gig. We had a great time. We did a lot of interesting stuff with it. And as I sat there and wrote and worked on stuff with them, some of the interesting things that one of the things I was doing was I was covering college sports. I had been writing for them forever. I mean, for a whole calendar year. By the time we got to college sports, the second half of 2019, I've been writing for them for 7 months, 8 months at this point. And I predicted Auburn and Florida were playing, and I said that Florida's been bad, and they had been bad, and Auburn should beat them. But Auburn is up and down, so it'll be close, but I think Auburn's going to win. It's basically how I left it. Well, Florida fans exploded into my email box and just were awful. They were just the worst. It was impressive how upset they were with me. And then after having these crazy Twitter arguments where they're trying to justify how good the Florida athletes are, which, by the way, they're not, then we're sitting there talking about it some more, and one of them finally just went the extra step. First of all, they're just the most angry emails I've ever gotten was calling the outcome of this game. Like, I've written stuff about all like movies and all kinds of other stuff. Talked about wrestling. I covered all kinds of things. This was the most anger that I'd seen at all. So then we're sitting. I start getting these emails from these different like bulk email things. And it turns out someone took my email address and submitted it to every chain letter, every news company, every news agency that they could find, except they submitted my name as a bunch of slurs.
Yeah, real classy.
So the emails were coming in saying, Mr. N-word, F-word, gays of America, thanks for signing up for Carvana. Like, it was terrible. They signed me up for a ton of stuff. And the prank itself is good. The execution's a little cheesy with all the slurs. Like, that's just mentally lazy. It would have been funnier if they had
like Florida State fan or something.
Yeah, or like put the score, because it turns out I was wrong. Florida won the game. So the funnier thing would have been putting the score.
Yeah.
But instead they just put hate speech. And yeah, that's what makes college sports fans the worst. Is like the biggest amount of traction, the biggest amount of interaction was all coming from this darn outcome that I was predicting. It was the worst. It was just the worst.
And we're not even going to get me started on the NCAA being the worst organization, literally on the face of the planet.
And all voluntary. I love it.
Yeah.
That's my favorite part is it's all voluntary. They have to volunteer
like,
to submit themselves to this sort of torture.
Like, why?
Because it's, the right thing to do.
Wrong, but okay.
So right now the NBA playoffs are going on.
Mm-hmm.
The Milwaukee Bucks are the 1 seed in the East. They are the best team in the East. They're not dealing with any injuries. They don't have anybody out. No one important. Their top players are all healthy, okay? The guys that they've invested in are here, and they're playing in the playoffs. Giannis Antetokounmpo is supposed to be one of the best players in the league, the Greek Freak. He's the second coming of LeBron James. He's the third coming of Michael Jordan. He is all that is future basketball. They see several MVP honors in this guy's future. They think he is everything that you could want in an NBA player. Okay?
Okay.
All right. They're in round 2. They're playing the Miami Heat, which is a team that was just kind of, first of all, it was drafting in the lottery for last year's draft, and was also just kind of building through trades and stuff throughout the year. They were the surprise team who got Jimmy Butler when he left last year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of out of the blue for him to want. They were like, oh, what's Jimmy Butler going to do? He was eligible for a max, and he got a sign-and-trade max deal to go to Miami, and that was his doing. He made that deal happen.
Cool.
Miami is now up 2 games against Milwaukee.
What happened?
They are just hustling. They are shooting. They are defending. They are giving Milwaukee troubles. Giannis can't get it done alone, and the other guys are just not stepping up. And very quickly, there was one guy on ESPN radio who said, people were like, "Oh, what's your weird prediction?" And he was like, "I'm gonna give you a really good one." He was like, "Miami and Milwaukee meet in the second round, and Miami beats Milwaukee." And this is like early first round.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so far he's on pace.
Yeah, 2 games up. It's
Yeah.
pretty good.
It's pretty good. Jimmy Butler's a gamer and a strong defender, and he also has had trouble in his other destinations because apparently he just demands and expects players to perform and teams to try. And as dumb as it sounds, teams don't like to do those things.
I just want to play professional basketball for fun, dude. I ain't trying to do this as my job.
Right. So apparently when he was in, I think it was Philadelphia, he was butting heads a little bit with the younger players because he was pushing them. He expected them to be good. That wasn't happening every day. And so he was getting mad at the coaches for not being harder on the players. He was getting frustrated with the organization that they weren't putting expectations on the players. There's a lot of interesting things in the dynamic that was kind of happening there.
But I mean, like that's exactly what you want in an organization.
It is and it isn't. And here's what I mean by that. In Washington, John Wall is the Wizards. He is the Wizards. He leads the Wizards.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that was in his scouting report when he was getting drafted was John Wall will not tolerate people who are okay with losing. So if you take him knowing that he will not be okay with losing. On paper, that sounds great. In reality, the NBA is 82 games.
Yeah.
The record for wins is 60-something. You're going to lose 20% of your games, you're going to lose them. You're probably going to lose 30% of your games. You might lose 40% of your games. Still be in the playoffs and still have opportunity. The NBA is a marathon, not a sprint. And there are certain builds that over time become too troublesome.
Right.
The Washington Wizards have never been able to turn the corner into a great franchise, and I think part of that is because on the day-to-day, it just gets draining when guys like John Wall are just harping all the time, because eventually you turn on them, right? Like, it's one thing when someone's like, hey, we got to do better, we got to do better, we got to do better.
Mm-hmm.
But then eventually it becomes, hey, we got to do better, we got to do better, and someone just finally says, what do you do here?
Right. I'm trying as hard as I can.
Right. Maybe I'm not good enough, but neither are you.
Right.
And that becomes the bigger issue with certain players and with franchises. Now, if Jimmy Butler wins and gets a ring this year in Miami, hey man, he can challenge and push all he wants. But if it doesn't work out that way, I don't know. I don't know.
Well, as they are currently flexing on Milwaukee here.
Who was the crown prince of the East. Now that LeBron left, people were literally saying it's not Toronto, it's Minnesota. Milwaukee. I'm sorry, it's Milwaukee. The Bucks.
Milwaukee.
Minnesota's the Timberwolves, but it's more fun to say Minnesota.
This is
Minnesota. That was and Jimmy Butler started last season in Minnesota and didn't like it there.
Yeah, see, look. We started in Minnesota and we get here and we smashed Milwaukee. Easy.
Right. He got traded from Minnesota to Philadelphia very early on because it was not working in Minnesota. So then people were like, Philly can't afford to sign Jimmy Butler, so where's he going to get his max deal from? And that's when Jimmy Butler was like, you guys need to get me to Miami. And that's what happened.
As a variety of rappers and Mr. Worldwide said, give me to Miami.
Listen, Will Smith is the only reason everyone's even there. So
the only reason we're living in this millennia anyways. We live in the millennium.
We live in the millennium. We are in the shadow of greatness, and greatness's name is Will Smith. But yeah, I'm excited for Jimmy Butler. I think this not a lot of times do you see somebody do something like this that pays off right away.
Yeah, usually it's like, oh, this guy's good, but he's coming to a franchise. It's not like all the way put together.
Right, and Miami wasn't all the way put together. Now, one thing about Miami that I always like is they are aggressive in their roster building, and they have a great history. Pat Riley's the president, and I think he's got something like 12 rings as a player, as a coach, as a GM, as a president. Like, he builds winners. He wins. This is the team that they turn themselves into a contender with Dwayne Wade and a bunch of help, and then they go and get Shaq and they become a champion. Like, this is a team, this is a franchise that recognizes when they're close that they need to make big moves. And so maybe Jimmy Butler was the big move that either gets them close or gets them there.
Seems to be doing a good job so far.
Absolutely. And either way, we obviously didn't give them enough credit in the beginning for that move, because I didn't think Jimmy Butler was the move. I didn't think that was the move that was going to solve anything for them. But inevitably, it wound up that it was. I think even on our show, I think I said it's not important.
Yeah.
And we were wrong. Now let me ask you this: as we're gonna talk about the Rockets next segment here on the show, but this season with everything going on, if whoever wins, someone's gonna win. Someone's gonna win the title. Do you put an asterisk next to this year's championship?
No, not this year's.
You don't?
No, because we played most of the season. Like we're only missing a few games, and there's a lot of playoff games, and it's not like these teams are really any different. It's just the season was just a little bit shorter than normal. It'd be different if it was like 2/3 of the season.
So like, are you going to put an asterisk on the baseball season?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, I think this year is a nightmare for baseball. One, because it's terrible, and two, just like all of the weird decisions they've made, and the fact that nothing's consistent. Yeah. Like unless this season of baseball lasts 2 years, like there's no way. Like 60 games, nowhere near the level. Teams taking off several weeks. Like, this is going to be a nightmare for like every baseball statistician on the planet.
Yeah, I still don't know what they've decided to do about, like, the Cardinals missed 2 weeks of play, so 10, 12 games, whatever it is. I think it was 12. Like, let's say they're 7 games out. Obviously, they have to make them up. But, like, let's say they're 20 games out. Do they still make them up?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
20 games out of 60, you've already missed a third of the season.
Right. Well, no. I mean, so they owe 12 games, right? Because they had to postpone 12. So let's say at the end of this season, where every other team has played the 65 or 60 or whatever it is, the Cardinals still owe 12 games. So a couple teams are missing a few games. But the Cardinals are 20 games out.
Yeah.
So playing these games don't change anything for the Cardinals.
Right. Like It's just a nightmare.
Do they play these games? And even if they don't,
And 12 games is a lot.
That means they only played 40-plus games for the whole year.
Right.
Like, what does that do to that roster's stats, like the development of the players? That's not even enough at bats, like for the bat. They talk about when the Arizona Cardinals drafted the kid, the Oklahoma quarterback. I'm blanking on his name now, but he was a baseball player as well.
Oh, right, yeah, the double threat guy.
Yeah, and the scouts were already talking about in baseball, because he played football, he was already like 1,200 at-bats off schedule.
Which is insane to me, but...
Right. So imagine now, even for these pro players who played this season, but they played 40 games, 50 games, 65 games. They're not on schedule.
Nowhere close.
No, they're nowhere close.
Considering baseball is about 7,000 games a year.
Right. Kyle something. God, what is the kid's name? Oh, God. Second year in the league now. I don't even know now. I don't know. It's gonna bother me.
You'll remember later, don't worry.
I'll look it up over the break. That's what I'll do. But I really think that it's kind of interesting to me. These seasons are different, vastly different. And how are we going to view these seasons? Like, if Milwaukee gets eliminated and the Lakers win, are the LeBron haters going to be able to say that, oh, this doesn't count?
They're going to say it, but everyone's going to say, whatever, dude. You know.
Yeah, someone's always going to say it. But I guess my question is it valid to say it?
Right. Well, it's like saying that, like, Houston Astros aren't World Series champions.
Or they didn't deserve to win because they
right.
cheated. And listen, I'm willing to listen to the they didn't deserve to win because they cheated argument. My biggest thing is their best performances were on the road in the playoffs. So even if you don't believe their story, which is they didn't cheat in the playoffs, still the best outcomes for them were all on the road. So it's kind of irrelevant.
Right. And even in this last World Series, again, all the best, literally both teams.
Oh, that's right. Everybody won
exactly.
on the road. Yeah, no, you can't argue it. You really can't. And so to me, yeah, I feel like I'm willing to hear the argument, but it's not valid.
Right.
The LeBron thing, I'm curious to see what's going to happen this year, depending on who wins, but also just are they going to asterisk this season? Like, let's say the Rockets win. Every time the Rockets walk around, are people going to go, oh, well, yeah, they won, but it was the lock-in season?
Probably, but again, much like everyone who doubts Houston sports, they can get over themselves.
That's true. And did they win? We'll talk about that here in this next segment as they are facing Game 7, and we will cover it all for you after this break. We're going to jump out to break. Nerd Thug Sports. The Adventure Begins, Comics, Games, and More is open on 1488 at 525 Woodland Square Boulevard. With comics, games, and everything nerd-related, The Adventure Begins is the one-stop nerd shop. On Saturdays, they alternate between having Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon, and coming up, they also have cosplay crafting and trivia nights and BYOB nights. They're currently offering a 10% discount for limited time, which will be valid for as long as you grab your books every month. Hey, Conroe, this is Corey DLG of Nerd Thug Radio, hanging out here, just enjoying my quarantine time at home, and I hope everyone else is doing the same, social distancing and minding their manners and listening to the orders while we get all this health crisis straightened out and get this pandemic under control. I hope everyone's doing their part to flatten the curve, but doing their part also means supporting small businesses. Local businesses here in Conroe, restaurants, things of that nature that have been able to stay open, they require the support of their community. So takeout is a good option to do. So reach out to those places, order some takeout food if you can afford it and if it's reasonable. I'm not asking anyone to risk their health, but the community has always relied on itself to support itself. And this is one of those times where, as Conroe, we can stand up together and take care of small businesses and entrepreneurs who've been taking care of us this whole time, helping Montgomery County grow into one of the fastest growing counties in all of America. Thank you very much, and stay safe, and stay tuned for more Nerd Thug Radio.
Hi, this is Kevin Smith, former Dallas Cowboy, Texas A&M Aggie as well, and I want to say what's up to Nerd Thug Radio.
Welcome back to Nerd Thug Radio, right here on 104.5, 106.1, the sister stations, and we're streaming worldwide at IRLoneStar.com. Wrapping up this segment, before we get into everything else, we talked about we would mention The Adventure Begins, comics, games, and more. Little brother Nico, go ahead and take it away.
All right, The Adventure Begins, comics, games, and more is open, and they're still at full operating hours. You do have to wear a mask if you want to come to the store, but if you want to be a little bit safe, they still have curbside and other things available. Free Comic Book Summer is still going. This is like we're coming down to the very end of the summer.
That's right, September 15th.
September 15th. So we're almost out. But, you know, if you still want to come to the store, you can still get your free comic book stuff. Get your little passport. Get you some free loyalty points. That'll be a good time. They got some more events going. They still got their Miniature Mondays still going on. So head on down to The Adventure Begins, comics, games, and more. Wonderful staff, fantastic store, clean, family-friendly, wonderful place. They got your comic books on the store. They got Corey's book on there.
That's right. My book is on the shelves. It's available for purchase. But yeah, so get in there. They keep my books on hold. They can set up a box for you. You can have your pull box going. Gaming, all kinds of different stuff going on. The Adventure Begins, comics, games, and more, right there on 1488. Make sure to stop by, say hello, and come hang out, because they are a good time and a good place to be. Yeah, so we talked around it all day, but I guess let's get into it here. The Rockets did, in fact, win Game 7 against, I guess, like their new arch rival, the Chris Paul-led Oklahoma City Thunder. The series has been a frustrating one. We talked about at the very beginning of the series. A lot of people were like, "Oh, no Russell Westbrook. I don't know. Like, I don't know how this will go. Like, this is kind of interesting. Blah blah blah." The teams are super even without Russell Westbrook. And the series did flop back and forth. I guess I didn't give Oklahoma City enough credit because I didn't really see it as being this even. But a lot of that is just Chris Paul played great again, and still. We probably bailed on the Chris Paul thing probably 1 year too early. But we did get Russell Westbrook, who's a couple years younger in a similar contract. And so overall, we probably got a little bit better as a team overall. Now, that being said, this playoffs is weird, and now we have the Lakers up next. And the Lakers haven't looked great. And we have been playing good team defense. There's a chance that we can disrupt what's going on, but overall, I don't like our chances against LeBron James and Anthony Davis. I think in their final game, they combined for 80 points.
Yikes.
Against Portland. So if the two of them put up 80, they only need 30 points from the other 10 guys wearing Laker jerseys. And they're likely to get it because a couple of those guys are going to score about 8 to 12 points. So they're getting the hard part is you basically have to pick one guy, LeBron James or Anthony Davis, and you just have to completely ignore them defensively. Let them do whatever they want to you. Just, okay, that's fine. LeBron's going to score every time he goes out on the court. Fine. But then you have to max defense the other four guys on the court and just harass and harass and harass to the point where no one else can play effectively. And hopefully you keep the Lakers under 100. But I mean, I don't know. I think we only won 104, 102 last night. So it's not like we're blowing up scoreboards anyway. So overall, it's going to be an interesting series. But as we bury this Rockets Thunder series, let's talk about a couple things real quick. The Thunder are a team clearly planning for the future. I think maybe next year they'll be in the playoffs again, and then I don't think we'll hear the Thunder. I don't think we'll hear from the Thunder for a couple years after that. They still have a couple guys under contract. I think Chris Paul has like 2 or 3 more years, but I think they'll move him again. He's probably earned himself a trade somewhere again this offseason. Someone else will say, hey, 3 years, $100 million, but that guy still is balling. I think we could try that. Somebody looking for a veteran to put around their young guys will probably reach out to them. And if they get draft picks for it, I kind of feel like the Thunder will do it because that's basically all they want. Their draft picks start accumulating next off season, so then over the next like 9 years, they have like 13 picks, 12 picks, something like that.
Jesus.
It's a gross number. I believe they got 4 first rounders for sending the other guy to the Clippers, for sending Paul George to the Clippers. PG 13.
I love terrible names like that.
He wasn't even like it was. The people who have praised him rely strictly on analytics, and the people who criticize him rely strictly on watching him play. They were in a game 7 to when he was still a Thunder. The game 7 of the last year of his last deal before the Thunder could offer him the max money. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
In the first 3 quarters and in the first 7 minutes of the fourth quarter, he had 0 points of a game 7.
Oh, I remember this story.
They then in the offseason offer him a max deal.
Yeah.
I don't have any words for that. Like, that to me is the start of the decline of the Thunder right there.
It's a good time.
I bet they would have liked to have had one other good player on that team. Like, but instead,
well, I mean,
now
they got money. Now they have 20 billion draft picks.
Right. They gave him max money. A year later, everyone's unhappy. They kind of acknowledge that this team, as it's built, isn't going to win. Paul George asked to go to the Clippers. They dump him. Then Russell Westbrook says, well, if you're going to move him, I wouldn't mind leaving. And they then move him for picks. Like, none of this happens 2 years earlier. You don't give max money to a guy with 0 points in game 7.
Yeah. That, I think, is just... He finished the game with, like, hardly any points either.
Yeah, he finished, I think, with, like, 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Really
so it's not even like he turned it around in the last 7 minutes he scored 30 points. It's like no.
Yeah. He made like some gross like 3 minutes of like just the best basketball you've ever played and they won. First of all, they lost the game. Second of all, they lost bad. Third of all, at the end of the game he only has 8 points. Like, I mean, none of it's redeemable. And it's just, but he's Paul George. And so there's a weird thing about him where
that is definitely called resting on your laurels, man.
Right. Well, he's not viewed as a stats player. Okay, so like he does play great defense. I'm not going to deny him that, and he can defend just about anybody in the league well. I want to give him full credit. This is me being as fair as possible. But the flip side of that. Like, yes, he gets a plus minus that's usually a good number. He's usually like a plus 20 or something like that, which is great. That's a very good number. But the flip side of that is this is a guy who, if he takes 15 shots, he might make 6. And like
it's not good, man.
No, it's not. And he's not a rebounder. He's not a stealer. Like, I don't know. Plays good defense. Max money. And he's energy and he's effort and he's hustle. And those are all things you want in a max player, but those are all ingredients you want in all your players.
Right.
So, yay? Like, I don't know. It's Paul George. I'm not in love with him as a player. I'm not in love with the value he gets assigned. I'm just not in love with any of it. So anyway, he's gone. He's a Clipper now. And now the Lakers have the Rockets coming to town. Well, to the bubble. Also, the league, this is something that needs to be discussed. And this needs to be discussed more in depth at some future date. Scott Foster is the head of officiating for this crew that they used. He was the head referee, head judge, whatever they want to call it for the NBA, for this game. The thing of it is Chris Paul and James Harden both have gotten into issue after issue after issue with Scott Foster. He has thrown both of them out of games needlessly. They've had beef with him. They've complained by name about him, and neither one of these guys typically name referees when they complain. Chris Paul is a bit of a complainer, still one of my favorite players in the league, but a bit of a complainer. James Harden never goes after the referees in the locker room. He's not. Listen, they all do it occasionally, but it's not in what James Harden doesn't typically complain about refereeing because usually he gets 20 foul calls a game.
Yeah.
He has complained about Scott Foster by name numerous times. Scott Foster, when officiating for Rockets, the Rockets have lost 7 playoff games in a row when Scott Foster was the referee. Chris Paul has lost 8 in a row. The Thunder had lost 13 in a row when Scott Foster was the referee, the head referee.
Wow.
There's no business for Scott Foster to referee Game 7 of Rockets Thunder. And in a game that was decided by 2 points, there is a point of controversy where he called a delay of game at halftime towards the end of the first half on Chris Paul directly. And Chris Paul, after the game, made some comments. He was asked about it, and he essentially explained he doesn't know why it was called. He doesn't think it should have been called. And he mentioned Scott Foster by name, and then he goes, I know I'm going to get fined because I said his name. There's nothing I can do about it now, but there's no reason. It was just a mess. It was a mess. And
yeah, so that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's something that needs to get addressed. They have had a problem with Scott Foster forever. The Rockets specifically, but also there's a couple other guys. Like Scott Foster doesn't have it's not like he's in great standing with the rest of the league, and the Rockets just can't get along with this guy. It's time to address the Scott Foster thing. There was a time when there were certain players who just couldn't be refereed by certain people. We've actually discussed Scott Foster before on this show, and I know that because I remember us mentioning the Tim Duncan story with the really old referee, the old ball guy, Joey Crawford, who once threw Tim Duncan out of a game for laughing from the bench.
Yeah.
And
There's some people that are just...
Well, it wound up getting criticized. It wound up getting, the call that technically was the foul or whatever was overturned by the league. For a little while, Joey Crawford didn't call Spurs games after that. It was a long time before Joey Crawford called another Spurs game. And that probably wasn't on accident. Overall, I just think that it's time for the league to address the Scott Foster issue. And I know that they don't want to set a precedent where they go, well, the Rockets can't be reffed by Scott Foster because they don't like the calls, blah, blah, blah. But you've got to do something when you've got a guy that nobody can... When it seems obvious that even now that Chris Paul's on another team, he still doesn't like dealing with Scott Foster.
Right. He left and he's still getting absolutely thrashed.
Now, there was a game earlier in the season that I want to give full credit to. We want to be fair about it. Scott Foster actually won a game for the Thunder. That's not really fair to say it, but we'll say it that way anyway, just for the sake of this conversation. Chris Paul pointed out that a player that was being substituted in walked onto the court with his jersey untucked, which is technically a delay of game during free throws. When you walk onto the court, you have to be all tucked in, ready to play. Mm-hmm. Scott Foster was the head referee. It's a technical foul because they'd already been warned delay of game previously. So a technical foul gets a free throw. It's the end of the fourth. There's 7 seconds left in the whole game, and the Thunder are down 4 or something. So Chris Paul gets the technical. Chris Paul points at the guy and says, that's a delay game. That's a shot. And Scott Foster actually correctly calls it. Delay a game, technical foul, already warned. So the Thunder get to shoot a free throw. They shoot the free throw. Now they're down 3. They go back to shoot the other free throws. They miss them. Thunder takes timeout, inbound, shoot a 3 to take to overtime.
Okay, but it's I feel like that's not.
I just want to give him his credit. I know I agree with what you're going to say. I just want to give him his credit.
I understand that, but it's clearly someone else pointing it out and being like, "Oh yeah." It's different if he he called it and Chris Paul was like, "Oh, sick."
Right. No. Chris Paul was on it. The second the guy stepped foot on the court and was tucking his jersey, Chris Paul was already yelling "That's a delay game." Which, by the way to be rules guy, Chris Paul. Way to be rules guy.
I mean, we take those.
Hey, you take the W's how you can get them in sports, man, for sure. But he did at least call it. He could have ignored it. Like, he doesn't like Chris Paul, apparently. I mean, that's what it seems like. So, I mean, it would have been just as easy for him to just swallow the whistle. And even as Chris Paul's yelling at him, he could have just looked at Chris and said, "That's enough. I call what I call." No one can stop that.
I mean, that's true. But at that point, like, he didn't want to make the optics probably look that bad.
I mean,
someone's clearly in violation, and he's like, well,
listen, let me make it real
I'm
easy.
just going to
for
ignore
If
you.
I don't like Chris Paul and this might help Chris Paul, I might not call it. But that's why I'm not a referee.
Exactly.
Because I'll be honest, I'd have money on the game. Chris, look, the spread was 5. I need him to make this shot anyway, so shut up. On that illegal note, I am 37 today. It is my birthday. We've been doing Nerd Thug Radio for 4 years. We've been having a great time with everything. I want to thank everybody. On behalf of little brother Nico and myself, and on behalf of Adventure Begins Comics, Games, and More, same Nerd Thug time, same Nerd Thug channel. Stay safe, stay friendly, stay clean, stay helpful, stay kind. Enjoy yourselves. Try and find a reason to smile in these hard days. Fight the power. Black Lives Matter. Thank you, guys.